Good morning, everyone in California and most of the United States, and good evening, Ireland. I'm joined once again by Randal Plunkett, who is the author of the book uh, Wild Thing Finding Hope and a Home in the Wild, and has been on the show a couple of times this week. We've been talking about the ability to watch nature be a teacher when we give nature the chance to be a teacher and manage herself. I don't know. I don't want to get into the gender thing. I'm still comfortable referring to nature as mother. But good morning, Randall. I'll let you speak, and then I'll tell everyone which specific topic out of the never-ending list of things that I have on the list for us to talk about we're going to talk about today.
Good afternoon. Sorry for the state of me, but I have been in a dark room for 12 hours straight. And my eyes are still adjusting and I look a bit grotty. So good time to talk about wild.
Good. I just came back from nature to prepare me for being in front of the computer. Okay, so you mentioned in your book a couple of examples that I could relate to here, where I watch humans try to manage things that never needed to be managed in the first place. And then once we set down that path of trying to manage it ourselves, it requires all of these resources, it requires money, and we continuously are hurting the system that we're now managing, in addition to the irony that we never needed to have been managing it in the first place. A couple of things. You mentioned the plastic cones that people put around saplings in your book.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of that here, and I've seen them misused here, and I've seen them turn into just litter and debris. And you mentioned people telling you that the weeds were going to grow taller than your castle and what's going to happen otherwise. And you also mentioned, the details aren't clear to me, a little bit about managing the forest in terms of branches on the ground or something to that extent. There's a couple of examples that stood out to me. Are those all accurate?
Yeah, I mean, what we did originally, how Dunsany was run, is that we had a farm, and the farm was usually in animals. And towards the end of my father's life, we'd incorporated crops for a large section of it. And then the forest was, it wasn't harvested, but as trees came down, we would keep things tidy. When things fell, we'd cut them, we'd sell them, we'd exploit the benefits of the woodlands. That involved machines, that involved chainsaws, that involved driving pickup trucks through them. Now, there's a place for some of that, I guess. But the problem was we suffered the same problems that everybody else suffers. The deer were destroying the forest, or destroying the new generation of forest, let's call it that. We were driving tractors and pickup trucks that were causing damage to the ground, to the plants, to the branches. We were invasive. And the land was grazed continuously, and the lands that were in crops had all the usual stuff. The tillage, the chemicals, the usual. When we started rewilding, we did not give up on the crops. That's how we paid for all of this. But what we did start doing was start adjusting things. Attitudes changed. We didn't allow any kind of detriment to hedgerows or anything like that. We stopped all animal agriculture and anything associated that would be benefiting animal agriculture. So I no longer allowed hay to be cut at Dunsany, because hay ultimately is fed to animals, and animals are exploited for our own needs, and I had a problem with exploitation. It also, to me, didn't make sense, because animals should be able to survive their habitat. If they cannot survive their habitat, one has to ask the question, why? Now, some of those answers may reverse to they don't have enough habitat, which I would agree. But for me, I've seen cattle survive. I've seen wild horses. They get thinner and they put on weight. They put on weight to be able to survive less food. It's only in a heavy agricultural focus that we start having to worry about animals losing weight. Losing weight is a natural thing. So we stopped doing any of that because animals are not our toys. They are not our belongings. They are creatures that should have the same level of protections and I would say rights as us, because in reality, what makes us so good other than the fact that we are able to impose will?
A lot of people in the comments are glad to see you back. They're saying hello to you and welcome to the show.
Well, it's always good to be back from my friends on the other side of the ocean.
I'm gonna do my spiel here, and I wonder how many of these you relate to and how many more examples that weren't in your book you can share with us that you've witnessed since the time of publishing. But something that stands out to me and probably stands out to a lot of people is our attitude toward leaves. And in a lot of places here, leaves are just not tolerable at all anymore. Just they can't be on the ground for a moment without a leaf blowing team coming through. But at the same time, the people that don't want the leaves will go to a store and buy back those leaves in the form of mulch, now being sold to them in a plastic bag. So we're trying to replicate something that nature was already taking care of. But it doesn't end there. People will also replace leaves with wood chips. And which brings me to we have this huge fire fear, particularly in California, and now leaves are villainized as being a flammability risk, and trees are a flammability risk, so those aren't okay. But chopped up pieces of wood we're not worried about, interestingly enough. Now there's a flaw that comes along with the wood chips, in addition to the other flaws I already said, and that is a fungal growth, which you'll never find on leaves. But the leaves, as I'm sure you know, have a much greater purpose. They also provide nesting places, hibernation places, the birthing grounds of the next generation of microorganisms and insects, and places for newts and salamanders to hide, and bees are pollinators. And I'll go down the road and I'll see these signs that say, "Save the bees." And I know these people go home and leaf blow and remove the ability for bees to survive, because we've decided that nature's system of providing leaves is not acceptable to us, as if we know better. They will click like on a post about going organic, but then they'll go and buy chemicals to replace the truly organic system, the nutrients that would have been provided and are only now missing because they paid someone to remove those nutrients. I did something. I would actually go around. I was the weirdo in the neighborhood. I went around and I would gather all the leaves that I could before the leaf blowing teams would arrive. One, to demonstrate that the leaf blowers were just robot people that walked around like zombies, waving their machines around regardless of what they accomplished, because the fact that I had already cleaned all the streets made no difference. The second point of that is no matter how many leaves I brought into my place in my yard, they all disappeared magically. Where did they go? I certainly never removed them. There weren't any leaf gnomes getting rid of them. Seems to me that there was a system in place that was solving things. We take this to a couple more things that people do with leaves that I think is kind of funny, kind of absurd. People will go into their yards where they have removed leaves and literally blasted the ground bare. But then they'll say, boy, I don't want weeds to come up. So they'll put down a tarp barrier to prevent weeds from coming up, which the leaves would have done. They will also go and buy insulation to put on the ground to protect their young plants when the weather gets cold. Something else that leaves provided. The more enthralled I became with leaves, the more I would notice that they were taking the brunt of the frost. And if I lifted underneath the leaves, things were nice and warm and cozy. despite the fact that the frost was right there. Now, how many store-bought items have I already listed just to replace leaves, which need to be there for a multitude of reasons that I haven't even gotten to yet, such as retaining moisture, hibernating the bees, the food for the other organisms, the weed suppression. And then here's the most fascinating thing that I observed was that when I started pulling invasive weeds and putting down a leaf cover of native oak trees that we have here in California, I asked myself, well, isn't this going to be a problem if in fact it's a weed suppressant? Isn't this going to stop native annuals or even small perennials from coming up if it's such a good weed suppressant? I can't explain this, and I don't have to be able to explain it for it to be true, just like you witnessed some crazy things that happened, even though you couldn't necessarily explain them at first. Somehow the native oak tree leaves let native plants through and stopped the non-natives. One of the most incredible things I've ever witnessed.
Mm.
The extent that nature has already solved the details of a very complicated system, and we just come through and shit all over it and then try to replace it with something that doesn't actually work, is astonishing to me. And the weeds stood out to me in yours because we have this thing in California where you have to either be grazing the land with cattle or sheep or goats, but you certainly can't leave any of it, whether it's private, whether it's public, whether it's protected. It's all being grazed, except for places that people forgot. There are a couple of tiny corridors that I found that the managing people forgot to manage. And guess what? Those areas are doing better than the areas that are constantly being managed, with the inclusion of the fact that the weeds are shorter where we aren't managing them. And it's not because all this wildlife came back and ate them. I know the deer enjoyed the fact that you let plants grow and they did some of the managing for you. But you also mentioned that they fall over and they return to the earth and become part of that system. They don't just keep growing and overtake a castle.
Nope.
We also
get rid of anyway.
We get rid of worms that aerate the soil. We poison the soil and they come up on the sidewalks and commit suicide there. But then we'll bring through machines that will do aerating. So you had all this land and you let the weeds grow. The weeds went back to the earth. The deer enjoyed some of it. And here you have a wonderful working system full of wildlife now. And you don't have to go out there and manage. Nature's managing for you. And I wanted to ask, since we have you on the show, are there any new recent examples that you're like, wow, nature had that figured out and I hadn't even considered it before?
Well, I'm looking at I don't know if you guys have, but in Europe right now, we're having a giant heat wave.
Yeah.
And France is cooking.
Yeah.
And Ireland is also cooking. We have abnormally high temperatures. And one of the big problems that we heard this week was that one of our national parks had a forest fire. Anyone who knows anything about Ireland knows that that's not a thing. We rarely ever have forest fires. The only time we ever might get forest fires is in plantations of foreign trees, such as the Norwegian spruce, because they are overly dry and it creates a bit of a tinderbox. But the fact that a national forest caught fire, for me, says a few things. Now, there was an environmentalist who is here in Ireland, and he has a rainforest, an Irish rainforest. That's what he claims anyway. I've never been to see it, but it's meant to be wonderful. About 70 acres. And he was saying today, in fact, these are not areas of fire risk because all that vegetation, all that natural growth, all the natural undergrowth creates layers of traps for moisture.
Yeah.
When you have a monoculture, you have no such thing.
Mhm.
And the thing is, when you ask me about those things, I would tell you these. My grasslands, I walked through them yesterday, and there's still moisture underneath. It's not that they are wet because the heat is intense, but
Yep.
they are not likely to catch fire at this stage. They are certainly not dry. There's greenery there. Yeah, the tops are slightly browned for sure, but they brown anyway at this time of
Mhm.
year. Grass isn't always green unless you have some genetically modified grass that stays green all the time. Irish natural grass has a cycle. It starts as green, gets to the point where it starts to seeding, and then it goes brown on the top. And then eventually grass falls on itself, dies, becomes lumps. And just like your leaves, they create habitats. They protect the ground. They protect wind from blowing soil away, because soil erosion is a major thing. And one of the things that happens with rewilding is things just hold on better. When you have a lot of trees, they hold the soil. When you have trees around a field and your man has potatoes, and then big heavy rains come along and wash the topsoil off, it's those tree barriers that are going to trap the soil from being washed away too far away. The problem is when you look at those big soya fields that you guys have, you won't see hedgerows because they take them all out. And then they have these massive, massive fields in places like Idaho. And, and those are cornfields or whatever that you see in the movies where people have to fly airplanes to dump chemicals all over them.
Yeah.
We don't have that in Ireland. We don't really have that here. We don't have that in Dunsany, because one of the things that we have here is everywhere has hedgerows. And I will argue that our hedgerows are not adequate, but they do exist. And in Dunsany, we have more natural hedgerows. We allow those hedgerows to become big, big trees and bushes, which means you have a thickness.
What species were they specific about the species used for the hedgerows?
A lot of the time it's hawthorn. Those are natural hedging trees. Hawthorn, there's something called, we get a lot with, well, these days we get sycamore, which is probably not very intentional. We have a lot of things like, what's it called? Gelder rose. We have a lot of those kinds of things. They are typically what you see in hedgerows. Irish hedgerows largely are built of hawthorn, usually. The reason why I think they were traditionally planted is because they have spikes and they have a wonderful white flower, but they do not become huge trees. Hawthorns are not generally big master trees. So a combination of those. Normally what you have is individual trees planted within the hedgerows. Those tend to be more broadleaf trees like oaks and things like that. That's what you see along the landscape. Now, if you drive around typical farms here, you will see them cut to a hedge. And that means small and square so you can see over them. Now, call me antisocial. I don't want anyone to look over my hedgerow. I want the birds to be up high. So my hedgerows, we cut them at the very end of the year. And it's always very important. It's at the very end of the year where animals are not taking benefits from them. And pollination is completely finished. So it usually is at the end of December. And we breast them only to maintain safety on the road. We never, ever cut the upward side of the hedgerow like the rest of the neighbors do. So if you come to Ireland and you drive around here and you see hedgerows that are 8, 9, 10, 12 feet tall, chances are you have reached Dunsany, because we do not and will never cut hedgerows, because hedgerows, we're not trying to create big walls or barriers. We're trying to create natural areas for animals to move, because the hedgerow is the only thing we have left in which small, more vulnerable animals can travel. So we're very keen on hedgerows here. But to get back to what you were saying, the leaves and things that you have very much are here the same. We do not blow any leaves. I think if you are blowing leaves in Ireland,
like the Irish don't.
I mean, I've seen people blowing leaves, but you know what? I think if you try and blow leaves in Ireland, you're insane, because we are an island that constantly gets wind. So if you blow leaves, On Monday, by Tuesday, they're back exactly where they were before. So I think if you are blowing leaves, you're probably mentally ill, or you really really hate leaves. Um, but the local councils will sweep and get rid of some of the leaves on the road. They don't want people to slip, and that happens. But even the my local road, when the leaves come down, they kind of just break down. The cars go over, and I'm sure if I was to come at the right time, I might see some sort of council vehicle that sweeps the road. But honestly, in all sincerity, where I live, I've never seen that. I know they do it in towns, but they don't see that here. And the leaves in my property, I mean, if we have problems with the leaves on a doorstep, we just sweep them into the bushes because they'll do better there. You know what I mean? We don't blow leaves here.
Weird.
There's no reason for it. Leaves are a natural part of the system. I don't necessarily want one on my patio in case I slip in them because it gets so wet here. In the dead of winter, they will become slippery and you can slip and crack your head. But I'm also not a guy who has a patio. So actually, in reality, I don't do anything with the leaves. I do pull them out of my drain pipes because they will block a drain well enough.
Right.
But we just move them and then throw them into the bushes where they will do even better.
Right.
Because as you said, they're critical. They break down. They are in the natural mulch. They are also carbon breaking down into the soil. Leaves are essential. So we don't do stuff like that. And management, where we stopped managing, we stopped cutting wood in the forest. We stopped allowing big, heavy vehicles to come into the forest. And that's one of the things that happens because when you don't have big machinery coming through, you get undergrowth. And undergrowth is protection. It's protection for the animals, but it also creates complexity. And where you have complexity, you have natural resilience. Things that are very simple do not have natural resistance. You need variables. So our forests, when they stopped being managed, trees fell down, paths were blocked. Well, you know what I did? I found a new path. I followed the deer paths. And in time, I mean, if a tree falls across my driveway, I will remove it because I need to get out of my driveway. But aside from my driveway, which requires access, most trees that fall down, at least 50%, because we have a 50-50 rule, as I think I said to you before, 50% of trees and things that fall down, we have allowed to use. The other 50% we must give to nature. It's 50-50. Nature is a relationship, and a relationship requires give and take. So we take, but we also allow, and allowing trees to fall and naturally break down. I personally, if it was up to me, it would be much worse. I would probably have a 75% rule. But then I'd probably be very scruffy, as I am today. But the truth of the matter is that nature allowing, I like fallen trees. I like when I go to a woodlands and I have to climb. There is nothing more sexy than having to climb through woodlands. You know what I really hate? Tracks. I hate bins. I hate picnic areas. I hate areas that have special things put on, like wood chips. Now, it's better than concrete, but, it's not a woodlands then. Now you're in a park. So I don't do that. I don't have any of that sort of thing in my place. We don't do wood chips. It sounds like a lovely thing, wood chips, but it doesn't interest me in the slightest. It's not natural. Look, it will break down. It's still better than putting concrete. But, is there something so wrong with the weeds? Tracks are lovely. And the one benefit about living in the countryside is you actually get to see some nature, some woodlands, some natural expressions. So I try my best to appreciate even the most modest of expressions from nature. So I use tracks, and we try and maintain a discipline here at Dunsany where we don't drive tractors and cars wherever we feel like. We try and keep things to very designated routes. So we never really interfere too much with the fields or anything here. And I find that has been one of the most beneficial things for nature, because you know what disturbs nature? People pushing prams, people having picnics or drinking cans. Those are the things that disturb nature. So we try and avoid that. We try and minimize the human interference with nature. We have to, as a race, have to be part of nature, because removing humans from nature is also not good because it never teaches us to be part of nature. So the idea of removal isn't a good thing. The problem is removing of people who do not appreciate nature is a very different thing, and I'm in favor of that. Because someone who's sitting there doing their TikTok videos and drinking cans and throwing beer bottles into the bushes,
Right.
they don't appreciate nature, and they definitely are an interference. But if you're talking about, say, someone like yourself, and we had discussions prior, that you are a person who is gentle with nature, you walk around it, you appreciate, you don't have headphones on, you're okay. You do not cause the interference that I'm talking about. But those people who just want to turn the place into a picnic glamping area
Well,
is
they're taking again. They're being takers. They're not giving anything back, and they're littering it. And they came there to use it for a reason that is beyond receiving nature's blessing. You just used it as a backdrop to do something that didn't actually involve nature.
Well, I would say it like this, it's not unnatural to camp. And, if you're someone who goes up the wilderness and puts a tent up and sleeps and then leaves what we call here, no trace, you don't leave a mess. You're fine. You're using nature and you're leaving nature the same way you found it. Totally fine. But the problem here is we have to get out of this taker attitude. Because the thing is, nature should be enjoyed. Nature should be revered. You're never going to have value for nature if you don't have an opportunity to enjoy nature. That's a very important problem that we also say, because the further away we get from nature, the more obscure nature becomes. And nature should be for everyone. That's the problem. You're balancing this idea that people don't appreciate nature and thus they abuse it, to a small area of the population that does approve of nature and does care for nature and doesn't go around setting fires or throwing beer bottles on the side of the road. But the problem is that we have to balance. We have to allow, let's say, the people who haven't got the vision to experience it so they may one day have the vision. And because this is not something that has come organically, this is something that has come as a result of many things that the human race has become. But in the same idea, we must allow people to revert back to find what they're missing in life, because so many people are searching for something. And sometimes that something is nature, because they don't know they were missing it until they found it. And the real way you teach it is through appreciation. When people appreciate, you people naturally protect. That's why in Ireland, we work really hard here to preserve our native language. See, most people probably don't know this, but Irish people, that we speak English, but we have a language. We have a language that is actually our own. We teach it in schools, but it is almost considered a dead language. There are a few small villages around the place that people speak Irish. I myself don't speak Irish. I'm better with French. But the reality of it is Ireland does, and the way we preserve our language is by creating the need for language, the need to protect language. And I think that's part of where the mystery of how to transition the future is finding a way that we start to look at nature in this way and start to value it and start to put those kinds of protections. It comes with an enlightened few. You have people today like yourself, and I think your listeners, who already are on the ticket. They already know. So it's really about creating opportunities for the people who are, let's say, adjacent to you to start appreciating nature. And sometimes they can do that organically, and sometimes they just need a little bit of a shove.
I want to include some of our viewers' comments and be interactive. Ray Cooper. Ray left a comment. I think there may have been a miscommunication. I'm not sure what he meant there. Ray is a person who goes into nature to be part of nature. And national parks have been created because of an understanding of the importance of what nature can be. And yes, people should be a part of nature. But my concern is people go into nature with so many supplies that they are making sure that they are separated from nature while they're in nature. So Ray, if you took this as an insult to you, that is certainly not, you're certainly not who my comment was directed toward. Corinne Lee says, if you are trying to blow leaves anywhere, you are insane. I agree. I was subjected to nonstop leaf blowing in one of the urban sprawl communities here. And Randall, trust me, it doesn't matter if the wind is blowing. It doesn't matter if the city's on fire. It's just become a crazy industry here. It's never ending.
Well, you know, it's a wonderful way to make a living if you have to be doing a pointless job that actually has no value, and yet you can't really screw it up because, like, oh well, the wind came along and blew it back. Look, if I can get a job like that, great. I'm sure they make more money than I do as a film director, so you know, why not? And if they want to send their leaves my direction, I'm happy to take them. I have lots of space for more leaves to go.
Exactly.
But that's the thing. It's like leaves and things. We need people, and I said this in my book, and I think you probably touched on it, I think last week. We have a circle of life. That circle is not accidental. The circle is that you are born, that you must grow fruit, flower, whatever. Or if you're human, you come into a breeding age. Then you get old and senile and boring and etc. And then you, most importantly, you expire, you die. But the bit that we always seem to get wrong in our methodology of thinking is that we have to consider death. And death and rotting are one of the two most important areas of the circle of life because, and I'm using an example here, oak trees, we talked about oak trees, but I'm going to talk about Irish oak trees or British oak trees. They give a lot of benefits to when they're alive, but they give even more when they're dead, which means their benefits outweigh their lives. So we have to consider that if that is the case of the oak tree, would that not also be the way of the leaf, of the grass? These are things that we have to consider. And just because we can quantify the value of an oak tree, in the sense that if we cut it down, we can do something with it that benefits us personally. But what we can't quantify very easily, or at least the average person can't quantify, is how many benefits all the stages of life and death of an oak tree has. Because as you said, they protect the ground from frost. They naturally are sequestering the carbon through the breakdown of the bark and the leaves. They are providing habitat. They are providing food. They are providing cover. These things on the surface look like death, but aren't they really the catalyst to life?
Yes, sir.
And that's the big thing. And you were talking a lot about leaves, and it was really interesting because I don't think I've ever had anyone talk about leaves in so much detail, but it's true. Everything you said was absolutely true. Leaves are part of the death cycle or the expiration cycle, and leaves are the layer of the topsoil that will become topsoil. And that's the thing. They create all that we need. So we must have leaves. We must consider leaves as part of the thing. It's the same with allowing grasses to naturally die back. And they might get messy and grubby looking, but I would also argue, isn't there a beauty in chaos? Isn't there a beauty in the non-perfection?
Well, let me jump in there. I sound like a serious hippie nerd, but became enthralled with the beauty of leaves. Even when leaves were rotting, I could look at them and be like, wow, this is still beautiful. And I think the only reason I stopped and thought about those things was like, what are we accomplishing through the removal of these leaves, this bare, ugly soil where humans have decided that plants don't want a relationship with anything near them. So we've just got these gaps of nothingness in between plants, or bringing in a replacement such as rocks or wood chips. And I'm like, did people stop and look at the leaves before? Because the leaves look better than any of these alternatives that have come in as a replacement. Forget the benefits, forget the biological benefits, even aesthetically, leaves are superior.
Yeah, it's true.
And
the thing is that's the thing. Fungus is another major thing. And those ecosystems, those breakdowns are creating an ability for the soils to communicate, because those leaves will be eaten by slugs and worms. And those worms and slugs are essential. They break down, they create the aeration of the soil, they help with compaction. These are all essential things for health and for the promotion of mycelium, or the fungus network.
Right.
And those things are very critical, because the more air and the more water can absorb in soil, the more you don't have a flash flood. The more soil is allowed to hold itself together, because what happens when you compress soil and it dries is it crumbles and turns into dust or sand or whatever, and then it's washed away, it's blown away. But you know what happens when you allow things to naturally recover? Things don't blow away. Things are secure. Things are replenished. But if you keep taking, and then you worry about the dry season. But you know what? Cattle trump land. They eat the land. They stop the forest fires. Maybe they do, but at the cost of the soil. Because what they also do is they graze things, they trump the land, they create compression. Then that grass is no longer there, and then the sun is beating down hard on already exposed soil that gets blown away, and then you have tumbleweeds blowing past, and you have, I think in the Americas, you had that whole time where the whole areas became dry and deserty from overexploitation.
Yes.
Didn't you have that? That's what happened.
We did, and we didn't learn anything from it.
Yeah, didn't learn anything from it. And you know what?
Maybe briefly.
It's not that there isn't some sense in what they're saying. I know in Portugal they use animals like buffalo and pigs, who help break down some of these potential fire causes. And fire, because we have plants that don't belong anymore. You have the likes of things like eucalyptus, which were transported from Australia, I believe. And those ecosystems are allowed or made to burn for that's how things work over there. But I'm not sure that works very well in Portugal. I don't think that works very well in California per se. So you have had these new plants coming and creating fires where there isn't supposed to necessarily be fires, or at least not as regular. We'll call it that. I know in Ireland we're not prone to forest fires, because nothing in our ecosystem naturally catches fire like that. Our ecosystems are vulnerable to fire only as a result of industrial plantations. And then all those evergreen Christmas trees that grow here, they lose their needles. Then they becomes a carpet of very dry kindling. And so all it takes is somebody to have a heat wave and a bit of some bunch of kids to have a barbecue that gets out of control, and suddenly you have a fire.
You can imagine how devastating even more here livestock is compared to Ireland, where we live in the arid West, where it took California millennia for the plants to change, to adapt to a low water environment and become drought and fire resistant. And that's a beautiful system that was in place to overcome a situation. And then European agriculture arrived and just removed that and replaced those drought resistant plants with fire fuel plants. Yeah. I mean, it's quite the terrible system. And yet no one here will ever blame agriculture for it. We will only blame trees. It's amazing what's happening. And leaves.
Well, the problem is, and this is the problem that I always face, and bear in mind, I am part of the problem. I am a profiteer of the system, because my income largely comes from agriculture. But the truth is, animal agriculture is hands down the worst for climate. Hands down. I think every measure and benchmark already agrees at this. And I know there's probably some angry people in your comment section who are going to say to me about revitalizing agriculture with regenerative grazing and blah, blah, blah. But the truth is, they still can't get past the fact that animal agriculture, pound for pound, is the worst. It's worse than transport. It's worse than cars. It's worse than everything. It's worse than factories. The problem is that we are talking about people having to recycle, people having to have electrical cars, but nobody is talking about reducing the herd. because that is a faux pas. You can say to people, oh, we need to have more energy. We need to have more of this. We can have more of that. We have to make sure that we're not using fossil fuels. But even, and I'm not going to be in disagreement with you, but we are so every day still ignoring the number one cause of environmental distress. The number one cause. Yes, logging is terrible. It's very bad too. It's on the list. Yes, invasives, very bad, on the list. Yes, absolutely, transport, pretty high on the list. But it's nowhere near what animal agriculture is. Nowhere near. And that is a major problem.
Everything that you listed leading up to animal agriculture here is taking place because of animal agriculture, deforestation, thinning, the war on weeds and fire fuel. Well, that fire fuel is present because of the animal agriculture, the loss of habitat, the loss of biodiversity, the reason that wolves will never be able to come back to California, even though they're trying to. It's not because of anything other than animal agriculture.
But I'll tell you something, this is the problem, because now a lot of people are talking about data centers. They're talking about, and what are the biggest consumers of water? Well, data centers, sure. But what's the second biggest consumer of water?
Animal agriculture.
Animal agriculture. The problem that we have, it's not that crops are so good. Crops also have their drawbacks, but it's not even measurable. And honestly, if we all relied on crops for our food supply, one could make the argument that there would be a considerable amount of diversity in agriculture and allow for quite a lot more nature restoration. And also, one could even go as far as to say perhaps we could introduce a certain form of rotation of crops, allowing for areas to go through periods of crops and periods of recovery. There would be a lot more possibilities. And really, ultimately, that is probably where we should be thinking, is rather than just doing a crop rotation like what you would do with potatoes, imagine if we could have less requirements for crops, for animals, and we could allow more diversity of fruits. Because, I mean, look, you've got one banana now at the supermarket. You have maybe 2 or 3 apple breeds. You have the pineapple. The pineapple is a bred out pineapple made to be sweet and juicy. I believe, who is it from, what's that giant company that has the Spanish name? American. Delamonte or whatever. Delamonte, I think it was Delamonte, produced the pineapple that you had, and then they had their copyright robbed off them. And now they've created the pink pineapple. Have you even heard about the pink pineapple? It's fucking mental. Excuse my French. It's mental.
No.
The reason why you have that pineapple and the reason why you have that banana is because it can be transported. And it's more successfully transported. That's the only reason. So that's my point. If we could create and have more diversity, imagine if everybody decided to eat plants tomorrow. Well, you know what? People would say, oh, but the world would go under. I'm like, that just would be against capitalism. If people suddenly had all this space at the supermarket, do you think it wouldn't be a week before everybody had new products to sell?
Right.
You'd have some guy selling alternative apples. You'd have another one selling dates from a different place. We would suddenly have an interest in diversifying what's on the table. Because at the moment, I mean, what do people eat? Like average people, they eat chicken, they eat some fish maybe, they eat beef, and they eat pork. And maybe, depending where you live, you maybe eat sheep. Right? That's pretty much the 5 major animal products that people are eating, some form of that variant, right? More or less. But those are 5 products, 5 certain kinds of products. And then you have dairy as well. I apologize. 6. Are you telling me 8? Oh, eggs. 8. Okay, 8 products at the supermarket. 8 types of products. In 8 different types of products, how many could we include with fruit and alternatives? And we're not even talking about funky stuff like seitan or weird types of, tofurkey or whatever it is, right? you would have so much opportunity to think outside the box in creating new things, bringing new products to market that people might have an interest in. The problem is we have no interest in diversity of product. The only reason supermarkets will lift a finger is to get a one-up on their competition. If it was up to McDonald's, they'd sell one burger. But that's a reality of it is that we would absolutely fill the supermarket. And a lot of these people who farm today would probably find some form of alternative, whether that be energy production, whether that be crops of certain kinds. Because people would say, oh, but my land is probably not good enough for crops. And they may be right, but it might be good enough for something that's not necessarily available today. And this is the thing we have. Hemp is an interesting one because we did a few years where we were growing hemp here. And for some practical reasons, we didn't, unfortunately, maintain it, even though I was very excited about growing hemp because hemp is a very interesting product. It grows very well. It doesn't dominate. It actually handles growth in cruddy soil very well. Now, that's not my problem because I have very good soil. But I had a Canadian hemp farmer who was talking to me, and he was saying, oh, it'll grow in any old crappy land. So I say this. Man on the cowboy horse and with the cowboy hat, why don't you grow lots of hemp that we can turn into bioplastics, that we can turn into hemp protein for the weightlifters, that we could turn into bioplastics and fuels and all kinds of other things? Why not have T-shirts made out of hemp instead of that polyester crap that is also a problem? Imagine if we started considering those kinds of products to grow. Then suddenly your places like the United States could produce a lot of the ingredients that we require for alternative things. You know, in Brazil, I lived in Brazil for a brief period of time. Brazil, they were able to power cars with like alcohol. It was mental. And they were doing that in the 80s. That's not even new tech. That's old tech. Now, I'm sure it has its problems. But yeah. So imagine what we could do if we wanted to use those products, if we wanted to use the land differently. Right. So imagine, and you know, a lot of people will say it's impossible. We need herding. We need all this stuff because otherwise people will go hungry. You know, AI is coming, whether we like it or not. And a lot of people will lose jobs as a result of AI. It's a fact. Good or bad, it's what it is. I am one of those people who may lose his job. But the truth is, we might lose the planet also. The only people that survive in the world are people who can grow and change and diversify. Because with AI, there will be other opportunities for other things that will probably come to light. And with the transition of plant agriculture, new opportunities will come to those farmers who are perhaps, should we say, a little wiser or a little bit more focused on survival. If you want to sit there and never change, well, animals that don't change go extinct. And that's the facts here. Because the reality of it is, whether we like it or not, this planet is changing. Climate change is happening. The collapse of the food system will happen. There will be some who will adapt and change, and then we can have something new. But those who are stuck in their ways will never be able to grow, and as a result, will not survive the next change. And that has been happening throughout nature for thousands of years.
It's interesting how we've responded to the need to change, or at least here. We've become more stubborn. Like the need to change is being shouted out, and instead people are doubling down on doing the wrong thing, as if there's some sort of virtue in not being told what to do. But when we were children,
I did see today that your president has given, I don't know if it came out today, but there was a farmer who was complaining that you can now get, I believe, some $8,000 or $10,000 from the government for turning, what was once protected grasslands into harvestable soya plantations.
Uh-huh.
Gotta love your president. What a dick.
He's shrinking
But
into our
anyway,
national parks too.
uh, political stuff aside, that is a problem because you see that is a doubling down where everybody is trying to protect the very little that is left, protect the wildlife. You have this aggressiveness. It's not that they don't care, it's that they're actually fighting to do even more damage. That's the bit that shocks. Because I've
Right.
got a lot of people in my area around here who don't care, but they're not actively going out of their way to destroy. That takes a special kind of mentality. Because
Have
the
you seen
problem
the
is,
anti-vegan people who will go onto a vegan post and be like, well, because of you, I'm going to eat 2 animals today instead of 1. It's like, what is driving that sort of a,
and
I mean,
because of
when I
that
was a child, it
post,
wasn't shameful. It wasn't shameful to eat a vegetable. I ate meat, but we also still embraced that eating vegetables was a very important part of nutrition. And we've reached the point now, it's like, you're supposed to be ashamed of eating a vegetable, and the only nutrient that a human has ever needed is protein from meat. And we need more of it than lions do, apparently.
well, if you were to go to Asia 50, 60, 70 years ago, and you were to cycle around the place, you might see a large part of the population who were very healthy till very senior age. And you'd see a common trend. You'd see mostly plant-based diets. You would see low obesity, probably much less syndromes. When you can make the argument that, oh yeah, we just weren't aware of those syndromes. But generally, you'd see much hardier people, and old people would be hardy right to the day they drop dead, because when they ceased to be hardy, they wouldn't survive. They certainly wouldn't wake up every morning dropping 10 or 12 pills. They were able to be physically active and maintain their health till their healths drastically expired, and then they would die. You would probably see that as a common trait. And nowadays, if you were to take your pickup truck and drive around any suburb of America, I'm sure, and not America, just America, in Europe too, and everywhere, not everywhere, but a lot of the more developed nations, you will see people who can't touch their toes. You will see people in their 40s who are on heart medication. You will see people who are in their 30s with multiple cancers and fighting those. You will see all kinds of inferior health situations or problems with their health. And these people in the countries that I'm talking about would look at, and they would be seen as starving because they are lean, they are thin, and their muscles don't look big or bulky, but they are flexible. They probably have a lot more strength than you or I, having lived out. This is, again, something that you see a lot more in Asia than you do in the West. But where there is an association, where you see more dairy intake, you see more osteoporosis. Traditional Asians, and I will say there is a distinction here between more well-off Asians who now, because today, consume a lot more meat than they did, to more rural Asians, particularly in places where there isn't a lot of wealth, where they're still living off the land. You will see the osteoporosis rate almost to no level at all. If you go to the likes of rural China or rural Thailand, you will not see huge amounts of osteoporosis. But they don't consume milk. Even in Japan, where there is some milk consumption, the milk consumption and dairy consumption is significantly less. And where you see the highest levels of osteoporosis in Europe, which I believe is France today, you will also see that there is also a high amount per ratio consumption of dairy. France, I believe, followed by England, are the 2 biggest consumers of dairy.
Our dairy industry is trying to push the Asian market now, trying to convince them that
why would you go to Thailand and eat all their wonderful food if you can have a McDonald's? That's exactly what that's the attitude. You see, our food system is so under threat because we only have one system. In the next few years, you'll be able to go anywhere you want. You'll get a McDonald's or you'll get the same food. It's already kind of a bit boring to go to places where you don't have, what do people eat now? They all eat the same stuff.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we're forgetting in Ireland, we used to eat a lot of our local produce, a lot of things that grow naturally here. We don't anymore. What do you guys eat?
But didn't you make fun of us? Like, people always made fun of the fat Americans, and yet everybody's in a race to do what we do. It's very interesting.
Yeah. We opened the first Papa John, not Papa John's. What's that other one? That chicken place. What's that chicken place? Popeyes. We opened our first Popeyes in one of the towns near me. There has been a queue that goes around the building for 3 days straight.
My God.
3 hours. People wait for Popeyes. Now in America, I'm sure people do not wait for 3 hours around in a queue to get Popeyes. Taco Bell opened up in my local town. Taco Bell, first Taco Bell in the country. Taco Bell, I think I can safely say without offending anybody, is rubbish. It's not good. I wouldn't say it's worse than starving to death, but it ain't great. Let's be fair. So the fact that we, especially in Ireland, because we're basically the Americans 50 years ago. We are Americans from maybe the 70s or the 60s. That's where we're at. We're getting what you guys got. We got the same. Oh my God, we want shops to open up late. We want this. We want it now. We don't want, we're getting all the things that you guys were doing in the 70s and 80s. We're there now, and yet you guys are like 50 or 60 years ahead of us in terms of attitudes. But I assure you, if we keep going the way we are, where you are today, where we'll be where we are in about another 40 years.
Those companies are poisoning your people. Who do you blame more, the corporations?
Well, unfortunately, those companies, your companies mostly, I'm sorry to say, are even managing to perforate the European Union, which until now has not allowed genetically modified food into the human consumption. You guys have been eating it for a long time, and you guys, well, your health problems are way worse than ours, even quite considerably worse. There's no American I've met recently that doesn't have some form of health problem.
My God,
it's bizarre.
No American.
I mean, look, I don't meet. Maybe there are. I'm sure there's people who are on they are perfectly healthy, but there are people who have.
That's a big statement.
That I've met. I haven't met any. Every American I meet has pills.
Yeah.
I don't have any pills. I don't take anything. I barely take vitamins. I mean, I have some B12 that I forget to take, but I got my bloods done. I'm fine. There's no problem with me. If I take some B12 once a week, I'm already laughing. It's an illusion. It's an illusion because everything that you have, your environment, everything is attacking you guys. And it's going to start attacking us too, because all of the problems that you guys have are coming to us. We've been able to fight it off.
Guess what comes next? Well, you already said it, really.
Once the GMO food comes in.
An increase in the pharmaceuticals, which is also going to poison your land and water.
Well, the French are already with you, because the French already take more pharmaceuticals than I think any other nation behind you. I think the Americans are number one. The French are number two. The French love their drugs.
But they don't eat their diet is still healthier than ours. So what are they combating with their drugs?
Eat cheese and stuff. But I think if you walk around France, and I have been walking around France, you will noticeably notice that people are generally, and there are lots of fat French, don't get me wrong, but generally the kind of body types on average are certainly less large. There are fat French, of course, a lot of chubby women and chubby men, especially older, but you generally see less than you would in Americans. I mean, you always know who the Americans are at the airport. You always, you know what I mean? You always know. You can tell them from a mile away.
It used to be obvious. The rest of you all are catching up. It's less.
We're catching up very fast. We are Irish are pretty chubby. We like it because we're not very healthy. You see, we never had very healthy food. We never had very healthy lifestyles. We drink a lot. We eat a lot of salty food. Our food isn't very good, so we eat a lot of crap. So we're headed. But the thing is that one thing that you still less is the pills. And it's also this mentality of taking pills, because a lot of my American friends, they're sort of sold this idea that they need all these things. Nobody in their 20s or early 30s should be taking an injection to lose weight. Like, that is psycho stuff. Like, if you were a person who had serious health problems and you needed, like, what's that, Ozempic, because you're like 170, 180 kilos and you're going to die if you don't lose weight really fast, then you can get the stomach operation or whatever. But even that is bonkers. But I have a colleague, a friend, he's 32, 33 years old, and he's been taking Ozempic for 2 years. And I'm like, brah, just get on the treadmill. Just maybe eat not white bread. Maybe eat something that's green from time to time. Maybe don't have everything deep fat fried.
We've somehow been educated here that food isn't.
And I should point out, I'm not trying to diss Americans, because I feel that this is feeling a little bit like maybe that I'm taking shots at the Americans when we got the same problems.
Reality. I think most of my audience can take it, because we're a very unhealthy country. I used to be worried about, I'm going to offend the obese people watching, but I'm like, well, wait a minute, who's left? Like, there's only like 10 of us left that aren't obese, so I guess I'm offending everybody.
I'm a working father, and I have kids, and I got to say, I put on a little bit of weight the last few years myself. But I'm able to physically walk places. I'm not overweight. I'm just not skinny anymore. But the truth of the matter is that I would say, if I had a diet, a more conventional diet, as in I ate meat and eggs and all that other stuff, and I have a lot of fun, by the way. You want to talk about devouring chocolate and chips and all that kind of stuff? Oh boy, I will devour everything in the sweet cupboard. But I would say, despite all of that, I haven't put on that much weight that quickly, comparatively to my peers who do not have a vegan diet. Because the truth is, like, when you eat, and I eat a lot because I like eating, food is the best thing that I enjoy. It's the number one thing. I'm not a boozer, I'm not one of those guys. I'm not a person who gets into football or whatever. That's not my jam. But the idea of taking my wife to a restaurant, or taking myself to a restaurant, sounds fantastic. You know what I mean? If I could eat really nice meals, that's what I want all the time. I want the Michelin star chef in my kitchen constantly. So we take a lot of appreciation for food. And I think that's also part of a European thing. Maybe not so much a Northern European thing, but my mother was Brazilian, and Brazilians take food very seriously. But a lot of Brazilian food traditionally, yes, had meat, but there was a lot of other things. Beans for me is the staple of all food, because the reality of it is, it has all the protein you need, it has all the fiber you need, and it does everything that you could possibly. It goes well in a salad. The thing is, it's changing, and it's very sustainable. Beans and legumes are probably some of the most sustainable crops you can grow. Like, I don't think that peas or black beans are particularly heavy on the soil comparatively to, as I say, potatoes or anything that comes out of goes to the animal agriculture. So imagine and relatively inexpensive. I don't see the price of black beans going up considerably. I mean, everything's going up in price, but compared to when I peek into the meat section, when I see T-bone steaks for 15 pounds or 15 euros, and that's still a good price, apparently. It's been a very long time since I would even know what the inflation was. When I was last eaten steak, it was a $5. So that just tells you how long and how much inflation has happened since in the last 12 years. But you know what? It's not too expensive, is my chickpeas.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a big movement here for a while declaring that veganism is too expensive. And I have no idea what they're talking about, because nothing's more expensive. It's probably
very expensive if you're going to go and get Beyond Meat burgers every day. But
even that is more expensive than meat.
I mean, I doubt
it used to be.
Rice is very expensive in America. I don't think probably. I presume potatoes are not
No.
so expensive. I
No.
presume if you were to go to the Whole Food store and buy some legumes that were dried, that's probably not going to break your bank. However, if you go and buy hummus, Turkish hummus or whatever, and you buy, vegan ice cream, or you buy like some fake mock meats, yeah, I can see that becoming expensive very quick. But people forget as well, and this is what baffles me. People forget that the poorest nations are eating the food that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the other thing I think that's very important that we've been lied to is this obsession with protein.
Yeah.
It is staggering, the lies that are come with protein, because the way people talk, if you are a 70-pound girl, you must have 100 or 120 grams of protein. Like, that is crazy. But protein, when you're growing, is great. You want protein when you're growing. You want to make sure that when your kids are growing up, they're eating an adequate amount of protein-rich foods. We can argue on the source, but the truth is, when you get past growth, when you get past you're fully grown, the last thing you want is lots of protein. You want to eat as much nutrient-rich food that you can, and try and keep the protein at a modest level. But I once spoke to a nutritionist, and he said to me, no bullshit. What you need is about 50 to 40 grams of protein as a man. That's what you need to be healthy, right? That's good protein for most people. And I think the average American and average English and Irish person is well over 150.
Yeah. Well, as you pointed out, it shows physically that we aren't meant to keep. Are you holding still, or did you freeze? Looks like you froze. I'm going to just hope that everyone can still hear. You were talking earlier about the Asian countries that their elderly still look thin right up until it's,
traditionally, yes,
healthy, right until it's time to move on. We have something here that I call the phenomenon of the pregnant male. And once it's past a certain age, you keep eating meat, all of a sudden it looks like you're carrying a baby. And it doesn't apply to any other species. There isn't any other species that as they get old suddenly look like they're carrying children. And it goes with all these different examples, as you've pointed out in your book. All the evidence is here that that's not what we're supposed to be eating. Now, could we get away with eating some of it? Yeah, it's calories, but now it's our primary food source, no matter what our age is. It doesn't work out.
And the scary thing for me is how living in denial we have become. Because the thing is like we talk as if these people that we grew, that our great grandparents who did not eat as much meat as us, that they all died of scurvy or something. That's not true. You're more likely to get scurvy today than you were back 100 years ago. Because the reality of it is most people who are not without, I won't talk about people who are starving, but people who are without, people who had a reasonable existence, most people were not malnourished. Mostly. They were lean, they were fit, and they were healthy for the most part in the civilized world. And, that's the facts that, if you look around, we seem to think that what they did was wrong, that this is what we have is so superior, that you need to now eat eggs and bacon and cheese and steak in every single meal. And yet, your great-grandparents didn't do that. The great-grandparents probably valued meat as something that they had to, it was a celebration. It was a thing that it's a special occasion where it's Christmas dinner, we're getting a turkey. It's not that, I want the turkey breakfast and now I'm going to have the beef sandwich for and then I'm going to have pork ribs for dinner. Like, look at that even as an excess of how many bodies you had to kill to get there.
Ray asked
Ray
asked if he's the only healthy American that you've met.
I think Ray is the only person who wasn't on like some sort of like heart medication or some sort of like, he was pretty healthy. I mean, I didn't look in his suitcase to see if he had any strange medications or health things, but medicine is medicine. If you get sick, you take medicine. But when your day starts with medicine,
Right.
you're a drug addict.
We have our 80-year-old viewer, Corinne, who says, I'm vegan, I'm 80, and I don't take any medications.
And I would say Corinne is not only wiser than perhaps most of the people, I would also say to her that she is probably very happy in life and probably very, very, very capable of enjoying to the highest levels of life. And maybe some of that is luck of the draw, but I would also probably say quite a lot of it is to do with good decision making. Quite a lot of it.
Yeah. Well, putting what goes in your body is a pretty important decision, and yet we've all been re-educated to put bad things in our body here in the United States.
And what I notice as well with vegans in general is that they tend to be, and again, this is a big generalization, right? Big, but they tend to be a little bit more open, and they tend to be a little bit more, should we say, aware. Not all of them, but quite a lot of them. And when you're aware, even if you're not a healthy vegan, there's plenty of vegans who get fat eating chips. But as a whole, most vegans that I've met in my time tend to have a form of, at least, should we say, clairvoyance. They're able to see more of the picture than the average, or they're more aware of it. And as a result, I feel that generally the people who gravitate towards veganism usually tend to fall into these types. They tend to have been looking for something and they found it. They tend to have saw a problem and they solved what the issue was. It's often the people who are looking in the wrong place. And I find that and I have a colleague in particular, she had a lot of health problems and still does. And she had to take medicine. She couldn't eat certain kinds of food. She couldn't do anything. She's good vegan. And you know what happened? She was not a vegan. Never was. She was, she ate all the Spanish sausage and all that stuff and couldn't handle anything, was always having health problems. But she had a very nasty health scare. And she needed to find foods that were going to be reduce the inflammation in her body. So she couldn't eat processed crap anymore, or couldn't eat as much dairy, couldn't eat anything. And she said, you know what? You're a vegan. You don't have any of these problems. Why not tell me, let me give it a try? And she gave it a try, and she felt immediately better. Her arthritis disappeared. Her inflammation went massively down. Her puffiness, her color, everything went. And she's not a healthy vegan. She's still eating chips. But the thing is that she has now been vegan for, I want to say, at least 5 or 6 years. She's going nowhere. She's well veganized now. And she's still we exchange vegan cookbooks, because the reality of it is she's like me. She wants the good food, but her health problems, she still has health problems, but her health problems have largely improved as a result of making some wise choices. And that's the thing I think with veganism. It's amazing what it can do for people to heal them on a spiritual level, but also on a health level. The thing with all of this stuff, and then coming back, we're coming back to nature here. Nature is a homeopathic thing, and veganism should be as well. You want to do these things because if you have a healthy body, you'll have a healthy mind, and if you have a healthy mind, you'll treat those around you and the planet much better. But those who have an unhealthy mind will constantly create toxicity and project toxicity on everything around them, including the planet and nature.
A couple of shout outs. Manaboy said hemp can be used as a fuel, and also the hemp heart is a great source of protein. Then went on to remind us that Native Americans abided by the three sisters, which were corn, squash, and beans grown together. Today, Hollywood only shows Native Americans as hunting. The only thing they did was eat meat.
Yeah. And I always remember, because I lived in America, and I remember this, is it Thanksgiving? And I remember the corn when I lived in America. And that's the thing we forget. And you know what? When I was looking at the corn when I was a kid, there was a lot of different, it didn't look like the corn I see in the supermarket.
Mm.
It wasn't even yellow. It was kind of like black or whatever. It was all this different kind of corn. And I wonder to myself, you know, we've been able to dominate through our aggression and through our abilities to control. But it's funny because even Native Americans, they have so much more wisdom than us. They just didn't have the firepower. You know? And I often wonder what would have happened if the Native Americans were the ones who were the dominating force instead of
But you know what?
the
It
white
goes back to
Europeans.
that healthy mind. And we touched, it's so fascinating. We talked about it in a previous episode about this diet we're putting on our bodies isn't just hurting our bodies, it's hurting our minds, and it's preventing us from thinking in a positive route to do good things. Now, if Native Americans had healthier minds, I'm guessing world domination and just wanting to wipe out visitors was not as easy of a concept to adopt as,
Well,
say, the Westerners that came to wipe out and take.
I mean, I wasn't there, so I'm sure there could be somebody who could argue one thing or the other. But one thing I can say, and one thing I have seen from practical experience, you are what you eat, and what you eat massively affects the way you think. That I know from sure, and that's how I know. I know it for sure because it happened to me. My change of diet allowed me to see things that I wouldn't have seen otherwise, I believe. And I can truly say that with all belief. I do not think that I would have been as able to attune to nature here in this project that I'm making had I not been vegan. I think it just would, I think we might have seen some benefits, but I think it's largely the mindset of creating a rewilding project that had a vegan base that allowed for the wonderful things to happen here. I think wonderful things may have happened anyway, but I don't think to the speed and the level of things. But most importantly, I think creating something that works, that has that vegan logic, has the potentiality to massively shift a lot of our perceptions of what we think. And that's important for projects like mine to have that power to be able to shift people's opinions, because everybody's a cynic until they see it. That's
I'm
why I
going
try to
to
do what I do here.
I'm going to try to bring this all the way back to leaves and another comment that Corinne left, and then I have to wrap it up to go to another meeting, as much as I would love to keep on this. The leaves going back into the soil and becoming part of the process and feeding the next stage of the process. And we talked about humans being a part of nature, but we also have this superiority complex and this separation. And some point during my vegan journey, I realized that the meat eaters would go around yelling, "Oh, this is fine because it's the circle of life and we're the top of the food chain." And then I realized we're not in the food chain at all, even when we die. Even when we die, most of us don't allow our bodies to go back. We've got it in a box or in some sort of a thing. And I saw Corinne said that she's going to have her body turned into compost, which is what most of our bodies should do, but very few are allowed to do. So even in death, we refuse to become part of the system.
I like Corinne. I think Corinne and I can hang out. I like, you know what we think, what they used to do in, I think in Norse traditions is that they used to, they would plant you and plant a tree on top of you. Quite like that idea. You become part of the tree. The tree will absorb the very elements of you and will grow into become something.
That's
I like compost, so I'm happy to be compost. Ash sounds pretty good to me as well, because ash also gives a lot of life. Putting you in a box feels lonely. You're not really engaging with the party. So maybe, you know what? I think the Norse idea possibly would be pretty good. I actually don't have too much of a problem with things eating me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that so bad? Is that so to be able to be the a banquet for something? I think
I
that's
think if
quite
you're
of a
going to
nice
go
thing.
around chanting part of the food chain, then yeah, you have to be okay with the full food chain.
I mean, I think it's kind of romantic to be assimilated by the very things that are around you and to be part of it, and you become part of that place. I think this is the time where we have to start valuing this romanticism again, because I think we've become very cynical, and that cynical attitude has very little options. So being allowing for a little bit of romantic thinking, especially when it comes to nature, I think is a very well, it's a great way to go. So I like what Corinne is talking about, and I think I might do the same. I'll look into that.
Thank you, everybody who participated with the comments. I apologize for the ones I didn't get to read. Randall, thank you. I apologize to end this, but I have to. But I look forward to
Well,
us doing yet
we will
another
have
one.
some more, I think.
Okay. You want to schedule? Well, I'll reach out to you. I won't make you commit right
We'll
now.
talk.
Okay. Thank you. Have a great rest of your evening.
Bye, guys.